Oxytocin is called the bonding neurochemical. It is the chemical or hormone that makes you feel attached, safe, and deeply connected. But for dismissive avoidance, the exact same chemical can actually feel like an uncomfortable threat. In today's video, I'm going to break down the 4 major components of why oxytocin bonding with dismissive avoidance and other individuals is sometimes blunted, and what this actually says about their long-term capacity to connect in relationships, and the things you need to know if you're going to be in a relationship dynamic like this. So here's the first major point. In securely attached individuals, touch, eye contact, and vulnerability trigger oxytocin release that then creates warmth, safety, and closeness. It is literally the neurological glue of bonding. But here's what's really interesting. Dismissive avoidance, they have a blunted oxytocin response. And research actually suggests that dismissive avoidance show very atypical oxytocin responses. So rather than oxytocin being something that produces a sense of calm and closeness, bonding triggers can activate their threat system, creating the need to withdraw. And what you want to understand here is that all of our relationship dynamics as all individuals are shaped by association. We are all programmed subconsciously, conditioned, in other words, by emotional association. This is why, for example, you can see 2 people have a totally different experience to the exact same thing. Because we are never just experiencing the objective content of what's happening around us. We are actually experiencing our subjective interpretation of it. For example, if you take milk and you have one person who's lactose intolerant and another person who loves milk and thinks it's really good for your bones, 2 people are going to see the exact same glass of milk and one person's going to be like, ugh, and have this sort of disgust response, while somebody else might have a positive response. Let's take another example of this. You could have the same objective thing happening, like your partner doesn't call you back. And for an anxious person, that's going to create a lot of distress. And for a dismissive avoidant, they might be relieved. Okay, so we are never experiencing objective things in the same way. What actually causes this, what basically determines the type of response we're going to have, is our conditioning about that thing. So if you've been lactose intolerant for a long time, you've had lots of negative experiences with milk, you're going to see milk and feel put off, especially if somebody says you have to drink it. If you are hungry and you think milk is good for your bones, and you have a lot of positive conditioning with milk and it makes you feel good and strong, you're going to have a different response. Okay, same thing with the lack of being called back. So we all are responding to things by conditioned association. And with dismissive avoidance specifically, what they end up experiencing is the things associated with oxytocin, the things associated with bonding, sometimes overwhelmed them, caused them to feel defective if they weren't getting their needs met and they were trapped in a relationship where those needs weren't met. So when oxytocin increases, they end up feeling this triggered associated need to withdraw and protect. Okay, so those are our first 2 major points. Now here's the third major point here, and then we're going to talk about what this actually means for partners as our 4th point and in relationship. And it's that when caregivers were emotionally unavailable, as dismissive avoidants were growing up, the child's brain starts actually associating closeness with anxiety and not getting needs met and really feeling out of control. Because when you're close to somebody who can't meet your needs, you end up taking on some of their emotional burden and responsibility of connection. And yet you are not feeling like your needs are being met in that process. So a lot of their stored associations are that connection doesn't really meet my needs anyways. It overwhelms me, it traps or engulfs me. It makes me feel like I'm not really seen here. And I often feel like my emotions are shamed or criticized. And so I feel defective when I'm around people. So no wonder their associations with oxytocin are causing this need to deactivate. And so what does this actually mean for partners? Okay, this is really important. And before I dive into this, if you want to go a little bit deeper into healing some of these things and understanding the neuroscience of loneliness and connection and how it affects us neurologically, you can actually download a free course for life. You get it for free for life. It's literally a gift. And it's all about the neuroscience of loneliness and how to build authentic connections and how to rewire fears that are keeping you stuck in sort of this chamber of loneliness that often happens for people. We talk about the different neurochemistry outputs for different individuals. We talk about it by attachment style and the 5 major pillars to healing and overcoming loneliness once and for all. So you can actually check that out fully for free. It's a gift. But let's talk about the last thing. What are you doing if you are the partner of a dismissive avoidant and you know that they have this blunted oxytocin response? How do you even respond to this? Well, here's the actual way out of this, and here's where it starts to change. Just because somebody has conditioned associations for one period of time doesn't mean we're stuck that way. And I want to give you an analogy. Let's say, God forbid, somebody gets in a car accident. Before they got in the car accident, they probably didn't feel extremely unsafe driving in a car. They probably were driving, they were used to driving, felt pretty comfortable, got in a car accident. All of a sudden, they go to get in a car the next day after the accident and they panic. Right? It's very common depending on the intensity of that experience. Does that mean they are now for the rest of their lives condemned to always feeling terribly unsafe in a car? No. Most people end up slowly getting back in the car and driving and essentially exposing themselves to this over time. It's called exposure therapy. And most people are doing it without even realizing they're doing it until they get more comfortable over time. And if you expose yourself to something in small incremental doses and then you see that you were okay, you feel courageous that you did it, you saw that you were safe, you build in these new positive emotional associations to driving, things change. And that is because we are always being conditioned. And what this means for you is that if you are an individual who, if you're on the receiving end of this, or if you're the dismissive avoidant yourself listening to this, just because you were wired one way for a period of time, you weren't born like that. You can rewire those conditioned associations. And that means when dismissive avoidants have consistent positive experiences in relationship, especially consistent positive experiences around vulnerability, things that produce oxytocin like eye contact, touch, feeling the sense of safety and openness around people and closeness or intimacy, even physical intimacy. When over time there's a lot of positive experiences here, those positive emotional associations over time cause them to feel like, oh, I don't have to feel trapped. I can speak about my needs. I can open up. And what can happen is this can happen through positive associations over time by accident or purposefully. Okay, if you are a dismissive avoidant, you can literally do things in relationships like slowly practice being a little bit more vulnerable and then make new associations intentionally. Be like, oh, that was good. That got me connected. I was courageous for doing that. I was strong for doing that, not weak. And you can actually change how you're perceiving it. And when you have enough repetition over time of new experiences with new associations, so you're slightly more vulnerable at the time, you actually feel quite good about that. You see that momentum building. You feel strong for behaving that way and for opening up, and you realize it takes courage to do so. As you start to, through repetition and emotion, have these new incremental experiences with new associations built in, that's what fires and wires these new neural networks over time. It's not the only way to rewire, but it's a great one, especially for dismissive avoidance, to practice changing so that now vulnerability doesn't feel scary. I know the associations that with increased oxytocin production, you don't need to deactivate. You can actually feel comfortable continuously letting your guard down and settling into closeness. Now, that's us going through it at a high level. Obviously, there can be a lot more to say, but we talk a lot about that in the Overcoming Loneliness course. That is all there for you in the link down below if you want to dig deeper. And thank you so much for watching and for being here. If you don't want to miss any of my daily YouTube videos here or free giveaways or shares I often do, please make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time.